welcome to AnimalChat, an Alberta SPCA podcast where we talk about animal welfare, animal behavior, and animal protection. I'm Dan Colby, and thank you for listening and for being passionate about animal welfare and compassionate for the animals in our province. Our focus today is on collectors, or what many people might refer to as hoarders. My guest today is Alberta SPCA Peace Officer Karen Stevenson, who has a certification in dealing with situations just like this. Karen, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's great to be back.
Okay, first and foremost, language is important, so we will use the term collectors to describe people who accumulate animals because the term hoarding conjures very distinct images, and we know from experience that collecting can take on many forms, not just the ones you see on TV.
That is correct. I usually find animal collectors are individuals who collect more animals than they can actually have the mental or physical capacity to care for. We consider animal collecting a passive form of cruelty. Large numbers of animals are neglected companion animals in inappropriate, inadequate, overcrowding conditions that can cause starvation, disease, and some behavioral problems.
You know lots about collectors. You have lots of experience with collectors, which is one of the reasons why we've invited you in, not just based on your certification, but you've got the hands-on experience that a lot of people may not have in dealing with collectors. You've had quite a few files in your time here at the SPCA.
That is correct. I have had a lot of files on animal collecting, and animal collecting just isn't companion animals. We are now finding that large animals, livestock, are becoming more and more common. We find that animal collectors are socially isolated individuals who have mental health issues and usually end up living in very squalor conditions. I have found with my files that a lot of the animal collectors also collect objects. So it's very common for me to go into a collecting situation and we'll see collections of angels or collections of remote control cars. So it's another way to consider and evaluate how deep their hoard is by finding their other collection as well. There's a lot of signs that are very apparent when you come up to an animal collector's house, and it also gives you a range and degree of how the collection and what type of collector you're going to be dealing with.
It's worth noting right off the top that just because someone has a large number of animals, let's say companion animals in their house, doesn't necessarily mean they're a collector. The animals could be well cared for and just be properly managed by the person who has them.
100% correct. Just because you have a large amount of animals does not make you a collector. If you're continuing with your animal care duties, then you are not considered a collector. Correct.
But there are different terms for different types of collectors, or the reasons that they may be collecting. First, though, let's talk about what makes someone a collector in your eyes.
Someone that is a collector in my eyes is someone who isn't following the animal care duties. So you are required to supply adequate food, water. In most situations in a collector's house, water has been turned off or water isn't available. So either bottles of water are observed or they will get pails of water and bring in as often as they can. But in a large circumstance and situations, these individuals do not have access to a car, or if they do have access to a car, they don't have a lot of money to spend for gas. Another duty of an animal owner is to supply appropriate medical care when wounded or ill. A lot of animal collectors will have disease running through their animals. They will have injuries due to fighting, due to overcrowding. There is a lot of times where the animals have huge behavioral issues because the person is so isolated from people visiting or taking the animals out to socialize that behavior is a huge issue for the animal collectors' animals.
And another thing that probably creeps in there is the denial that there is a problem, or inability to recognize that there is a problem, correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we have three types of collectors that we generally categorize. Your overwhelmed caregiver is someone who usually is more socially isolated than other collectors. So they are ones who've just become overwhelmed. They have tried the best and have been able to maintain the ability of care for the animals, food and water for the animals, but something such as a loss of a job, a loss of a family member, just sends them into a spiral. Your overwhelmed caregivers are usually animal collectors that are very open to officers' suggestions, offering of help with the animals, and they're less in denial of the other two types of animal collectors, which is a rescue hoarder and exploitive hoarder. Those are individuals that believe they have more knowledge than anybody. They are individuals that try to beat the system. They feel that if they don't save these animals, no one else will. They're better in their care, maybe in inadequate housing or situations than living on the street. So you do have different collectors that will be more open to help, and some that will be way more in denial that anything is wrong with the animals.
So that was the rescue collector or hoarder.
Right, rescue collector.
Then the last of the three is the exploiter collector. What is the makeup of that person?
So exploitive collector is, to me, one of the most difficult collector to deal with. Exploitive collector is an individual that always tries to beat the system, does think they're smarter than any law enforcement, any veterinarian. They often profit from the animals that are in their care, or try to make money off of the animals that are in their care. They definitely are not socially isolated individuals. These are individuals that usually have a lot of social media posts. They have a lot of friends within the animal world. So saying every collector is socially isolated is incorrect on my part, because a rescue collector is also an individual who has multiple social media adoptive pages, because they adopt the animals out via their social media. So the really only socially isolated individual would be the overwhelmed caregiver. But an exploitive hoarder, to me, is the most difficult hoarder to deal with.
And you had mentioned earlier that, I think we can all imagine a situation where, cats get out of control in a house and reproduce, and you talked about the smell of ammonia. But we see, and I've seen you dealing with situations like this, where someone may have dozens of horses, and they're saving the horses, and
Correct.
They can't keep up, because, as you would expect, a horse, being a large animal, is expensive to keep.
And usually the rescue collectors are individuals that are going out for the more medical needed animal, the skinniest horse at the auction collector. And as you add more and more of those animals into your collection, you all of a sudden are at a point where you have 110 horses in your care. You have not thought through how you're going to have senior horses being brought up into weight, having injured horses that will not be able to be cured from the original owner and their veterinarian, and all of these costs just add up and add up and add up until it's at the point where sometimes the animals that are in the collector's care are not receiving the adequate care that they need. But these individuals truly believe that if the animal wasn't with them, they would be in a worse situation, which in a lot of cases is not the case.
And you've sort of alluded to the mental health aspect of this, and we will talk about that a little bit later on. I just wanted to acknowledge it because I'm sure the people listening are saying, how does someone get to this situation? But I wanted to ask you first, or I guess talk about more than ask, which is that these situations evolve slowly. So it's not like someone suddenly has 40 horses or 200 cats. This is something that develops over time, which is what I would think allows it to get out of control is the person didn't just jump into this, they got there slowly.
Correct. So every animal collector that I have dealt with, it has been years in the making, usually from teenage years up to the point they are at now. They are able to hide how many animals they have from individuals via the rescue collector having multiple foster homes or having multiple locations where animals are taken to. So it's very easy for that individual over a period of time to collect a large amount of animals and not be noticed right away. A lot of overwhelmed caregivers stop having people over, so people don't realize how much they actually have in their house. Or people like family and friends just get frustrated and fed up with the fact that they've tried for years, and that's usually what happens is years of help and decreasing the number of animals only to have them brought up to even more amount of animals that they had helped rehome. So yeah, it does take years, and it takes months, sometimes years, for us to deal with a animal collector.
So a lot to unpack there, Karen, and so we'll sort of break it down, and I'll ask questions about a few things. But when I'm asking these questions, I'm going to refer to one case in particular because I watched this one unfold as you dealt with it. And it was 143 cats in a relatively small home. And this could describe any number of cases, but in this one, it was several months of trying to manage the situation. So maybe walk me through what you saw when you first got there and how you started to manage the removal of the cats from this home.
All right, so yeah, I do vividly remember this file because this was a very detailed, long, drawn out case. So it was, we were called because the animal collector was actually getting evicted from the property. When we drove up to the property, it could definitely tell there were signs of collecting. The whole backyard patio had furniture with tarps. It had large amount of litter boxes, old wrecked pictures. The front of the house, usually at all times, they're either covered with tinfoil or they're covered with blankets or towels, so you can't see into the house and the animals can't see out of the house. So usually curtains, cats or dogs can poke their head through. So at this location, we were viewing with tinfoil and Christmas wrap. Approximately halfway up the sidewalk, you could all of a sudden smell the ammonia smell, and it was extremely strong outside. The animal owner opened the door and was willing but hesitant to speak to us, because at this point they realize they are in a situation where they are going to be losing their one and only friends, their one and only animals that they have cared for. And we saw little green tree air fresheners hanging from the door frame. So the animal owner felt, because these air fresheners were hanging from the door frame, that the house actually didn't have a smell to it. I always like to approach my collectors, and each officer is going to be different, but I like to approach my collectors without the masks on, without the biohazard coveralls and booties. I find they're more open and willing to talk to us at that point if we're not coming up to their house already stereotyping them as someone who's bad. So I individually like to try to make connection with the animal owner. This animal owner was very willing to speak to us. At the beginning, stated there was nothing wrong with the animals. The animals were very well cared for. And I do have to point out that even though there was 143 cats, this individual knew every single name of those cats. And I do also have to say that in most situations, the cats are usually the same, or dogs are usually the same color. So you could go into a house where there's 143 black and white cats who are very similar, and I have a hard time distinguishing, but they would go by this animal owner and he would be able to tell you each name. So on the first day, it took us probably about 45 minutes of just communicating, and then asking, like offering help, offering food, offering, can we take this one to the vet because it had runny eyes? Or, you offer assistance, you listen, because a lot of the times you will hear the background story on how they started collecting, and you just listen and wait. That day we were only able to bring out, I believe it was 10 of that on that first day.
Yeah, so explain how that works, because when you say that, there's a reason why.
Yeah.
I mean, taking 10's a victory on that first day, but there's a reason why. Explain how you go about encouraging the owner to let you leave with some cats.
Yeah. So I always like to triage the animals in the beginning of and the animals will come out. They're very curious. When you're in a house for that long in a doorway, you get an accurate number of counts. You get to see if there is severe disease, if they're injured, because these animals haven't seen people or individuals. So when something new comes into their environment, they all eventually, after a while, come out. So we always, obviously, if an animal is in severe distress or if you see an obvious broken wound, that animal is coming out of that house that day. We do not leave an animal in a residence, even if it is a collector, if they are severely in distress. A lot of people right away will say, well, all of those cats are in distress, they need to go today. But we have to, in a planned way, work with the animal owner to get him the help he needs with the mental health aspect, get him help with cleaning services so the house can become clean again. There's multiple things that we talk about. We leave food.
Well, I was going to throw in there that, I mean, the long-term goal is to get all the cats out healthy and safe, and so working with the animal owner is a big deal.
Yeah.
So you'd mentioned that you triage them, so you're looking at the ones that may need to go right now, and speaking to the animal owner at the same time.
And at that point, when you can point out an individual cat that, say, has a really gunky eye or their eyes are watering a lot, after gaining some trust from the animal owner and pointing this out to the individual, they're like, oh, maybe that is. And then they're more than willing to work with you as the fact that they're not purposely trying to make these animals in distress. They are not purposely trying to say that this cat is sick, but they also come to the fact sometimes when it just overwhelms them and they don't realize the animal is sick. So just bringing the circle around and bringing their attention back to the fact that, oh, this cat does need to see a veterinarian. Why don't you let me take the cat to the veterinarian? And over time, in some situations, we will seize the animal, giving the animal owner the opportunity to reclaim once the animal has been vetted and cleared. But in those situations, the animal owner has had those time away from the animals and they don't reclaim because they know they are getting helped. So we either have them owner surrender to us or we seize and give them the opportunity to reclaim. So we still make the animal owner feel they have a say in what is happening to the animals. So it's not such a hard shock when we just go in there and empty everything out without a slow process.
Which again, if it was a horrific situation,
they're coming.
They're coming that moment. So, in this particular case, I seem to remember. I think you took 4 trips to the house, and so walk me through what trip number 2 looks like.
Trip number 2, animal owner was actually ready at the door. Animal owner had some animals locked in a small bathroom for us. Animal owner was eager and willing and realized having just that small amount of animals out of the house how much better it was for the other animals. Animals he hadn't seen in a while because they were hiding or scared or there was fights going on were now appearing out in the open. And him realizing that the animals weren't just straight euthanized made him even more eager to help us and to help the animals that we were taking. So he, on the second trip, we actually didn't bring enough kennels because we were not expecting the animal owner to be that willing and that open so quickly into our investigation to surrender to us. So second trip was probably our best connection with him, and actually became very connected with the animal owner, that when we would come back, animal owner would talk about family and talk about friends he used to have, and had started cleaning up the house, started cleaning himself up. So when we first arrived there, he was very disheveled, dirty, longer hair. Came back the second time, he was clean, showered. The back entrance had been cleaned up, so making attempts to make his life better. Third attempt was the same.
And I'm going to interject, as we're going there, you're letting the animal owner choose which
Yep.
cats go, right?
Animal
Explain
owner.
why you do that.
I feel the animal owner or animal collector having the opportunity to take the animals and putting them in the crate gives them some sort of closure. It also, they tell you about each individual animal, they tell you the name, they tell you who they're related to. It's not so stressful, and the animal owner doesn't shut down. If you work and listen and make them feel they're part of the solution, they are way more open to surrendering and realizing that they do actually have a problem.
And shutting down happens when, as we know, cats don't like to go into crates.
Yeah.
And if they're fighting it, the cats have a stranger throwing them in, and there's a bit of a fight to get the cat in.
Yeah.
This is upsetting.
This is very upsetting to collectors. So when we go to collectors' houses, we actually go with two officers, and we have one officer in connecting with the animal owner, one waiting outside the door, so we can immediately remove the crates that are full, so the animal owner doesn't have to hear or listen to the animals cry. I have a cat. She cries the whole time she's in the crate. So this is very disturbing to an animal collector, because they feel that they're giving up on that animal, or that animal's going to a worse life. This is all they know, so this is how they should live. And so we work very hard on letting the animal owner be part of the process, but also not leaving situations where it will stress the animal owner out.
So we have visit 3, and then the last visit. But at the end of this, the person still had a few cats.
Correct. And I just want to point out, between visit 3 and visit 4, the animal owner actually had brought animals to our office. And so he felt that comfortable and that connected to us, that the animal owner actually brought animals into our office because we were unable to attend that day. And these were animals that we had been trying to catch for a while and were never able to because of they were so scared of individuals. So that animal owner felt enough connection between our office and himself that he willingly drove to our office and dropped cats off. So to us, that is more important than going in and taking everything in one day and him realizing, and the next day starting his collecting all over again. So he was working through the process himself, where he understood there was a problem. He wanted to be part of the solution, and he did become part of the solution. So I was so impressed when he actually brought animals to our office.
And you left him with some cats.
We did. We left him with...
And what's the reasoning there?
So I mean, once he was down to his handable amount, and he did do a lot of veterinary care and spaying, neutering with the animals, but unfortunately it just got away from him. So he was trying. He was an individual that was trying to work with these animals, making sure they didn't procreate, and just got out of control because a lot of the cats and walls and that were chewed in holes, and so he didn't see a lot of it. And so before you knew it, a lot of animals had accumulated, and animal collectors are able to, in small amounts, care and love and make sure these animals are doing well.
And if you take all of them,
Yeah.
he's just running out and getting
Oh,
some more, as
and-
opposed to leaving him with the manageable amount.
Manageable amount, yeah. Animal collectors. So there was one collecting situation where I did have to remove 135 cats within. It was a 24-hour period. Like, we realized the situation. We didn't have the time or opportunity to work with this collector as I normally would do in a normal situation. And that collector within 2 weeks had already brought in half the amount that I took within that 24 hours. So there are situations for sure where if you don't work with the animal owner, get resources for that animal owner to go to therapy or reach out to social services. If you come in and take their animals, and often when I do have to take all animals from a collector in a fast sweep, I always inform RCMP to do a suicide watch. We always have, if we can, victim services go and make sure that the individual doesn't become depressed, still continues to eat and drink, because we may feel that this animal owner or animal collector is out of control and should never have animals again, but in their world, this is their world. And when you rip it away from them like that quickly and that fast, we also have to think of individuals and make sure we supply the support they need. And so, yeah, if it is a fast take, I always do victim service and RCMP, because it is not uncommon that people will try to commit suicide.
And I'm going to ask about that in just a moment. Some people are probably wondering, well, why do you let them get more animals? The only person that can prohibit someone from having animals is a judge, and that comes
Correct.
after a conviction.
Correct.
And that can take months
Years.
or years.
Yeah.
And so we can take animals, but there's nothing preventing someone from going and getting more animals until a judge makes that part of a sentence.
Correct. So yes, only a judge can do a prohibition of an animal owner owning animals. And even some of our collectors, now that we have taken to court and have prohibitions on them, they still collect. So in my mind and in my set, educating, working with the individuals, social services, mental health, counseling, in the long run is more beneficial than going out. And then usually if you go in and take all the animals, animal owners will go underground, or they'll move to an area where they are even more secretive. So here we have animals that are, in my mind, in more danger than animals that were in an open collecting situation. So at least when you form a collection with our animal collectors, we can keep an eye, we can monitor, they always reach out to us. It'll be a year, sometimes 6 months after our last dealing, but when we form that connection and we form that education with them, they will reach out to us when they feel overwhelmed again, or they feel like their collecting is responding up and amping up. And so then we know at that point we need to reconnect them with counseling again, social services, and try to get it under control right away. So that is why I always leave an animal owner with some animals, so that we can monitor the situation, we can offer services to the individuals and the animals, and we can ensure that the animals that do come into their collection are cared for.
We've talked quite a bit about mental health, and I mean, hoarding is in itself considered a mental illness, I believe. The Animal Protection Act actually doesn't give us any power to help people in this manner. But as an agency, our executive director has made it very clear that, you know, when we are doing this, knowing that this is going to be a difficult emotional time for the owner, that we make sure that we try to get them some help. It's up to them whether they accept it or not, but we try.
Yes, that's a very good point. It is up to the animal owner if they accept it or not. And I find most of my exploitive hoarders will not accept the help. And those are the individuals that we usually have to take to court so we can have some type of supervision of their animals. So yes, it's a very good point. We do offer it. It's up to the animal owner how they would like to proceed. And as an agency, we fully are willing and do take the next step if we feel the animals are in danger.
Well, so we should talk a bit about that, because some people might be thinking you don't take them all to court. We don't take them all. I mean, when we say take to court, it's lay charges under the Animal Protection Act for causing distress to animals. Because mental health is a part of this, we do not lay charges in every situation because it's not in the public interest to lay charges in every situation. Explain.
So so it isn't in the public interest to lay charges against an animal collector, just for the fact that they are wanting to be individuals that are helping animals. In their mind, they feel they are individuals that are helping animals. So for us to go in and just rip all their animals away from them, you're not solving the problem. You're just putting a Band-Aid over a very big open wound. We take, myself as an officer, I can't speak for every officer, but myself as an officer, I want to assess this situation, get the animals out that are in distress. I want to work with the animal owner for their mental health, which then will make the animals' mental health better, and then work with agencies where if finances are an issue for the animal, it's usually for the individual as well. So no, we do not take every animal collector to court. No.
At the end of the day, goal number one: help the animals,
relieve the distress. Yes.
Yeah, and if we've done that and we can help the person to not get in the situation again, that is a successful outcome.
That is a very successful outcome. If you can work with an animal collector and have that animal collector acknowledge their problem, acknowledge how they want to resolve the problem, to me that's a win-win, because this is an individual that for so long has had so many animals in their care that weren't being cared for appropriately, to go down to a number of, let's say, 3 who are going every year for exams, who are spayed and neutered, who have cat beds, who have food every night. They see the outcome of how happy their animals are, which then makes them happy. And again, like I said, we do 6 months to a year later receive calls from our collectors where they feel the urge to start collecting again, or they have brought a couple animals in and they realize it's a very slippery slope and it's going to get bad again. So that's why the connection with the animal collectors is so important in my mind, is the fact that we can stay connected, we can be involved in their life, where we're not having to go search warrant to get into somebody's house to see if the animals are okay. We have that open dialect and that connection with each other, that I can knock on their door and they'll invite me in, and then right away we can deal with the situation.
As I was researching some of the information you left for me before, as I got ready for this podcast, I was reminded, it's something that we hear a lot, which is a lot of people who aren't collectors themselves, but obviously are aware that these situations happen, will get they'll get on their soapbox and say, we need stronger penalties, we need harsher fines and sentences, and through the court, so that this type of thing doesn't happen. The reality is
it's a disease.
Yeah, the sentences aren't.
Yeah.
It could be a $100,000 fine. That's not going to deter someone who has a mental illness from doing this.
Yeah, correct.
$20,000, which is the current maximum under the Animal Protection Act, is still more money than they have. An extra $80,000 is not going to make a difference when they're dealing with their mental health.
Correct. And so I look at animal collecting as a disease. I look at it as any other disease, such as alcoholism, drugs. They need steps to take to realize the situation they're in. We take and help them start this process to better themselves. And like you said, it's up to the animal owner to choose to accept that or not. And as an agency, we will as previously said, remove whatever animals we need to in a very short period of time if we feel the animal owner is not open and accepting. So to me, this is a disease that takes time and effort, and because I feel that they're animals, a lot of people are not as accepting to giving the individual time to accept the help or get help. And these are years in the making, 20 years, 30 years of them being collectors. You can't just go to their door on one occasion and they admit everything they've done and just walk away from it. It is honestly a very big mental health issue that causes a lot of drain on a lot of resources. But I think the least treated disease is out there because nobody really knows how to. Nobody really knows. There's no specific program that we could offer them that states this is an animal hoarding anonymous, animal collector anonymous. It's a mental health, and you have to get. And honestly, there's not a lot of psychiatrists or psychologists that deal with animal collecting. So, to me, it is probably one of the most difficult diseases to deal with.
Yeah, so much to unpack on this topic, and as we're talking here, and it's been a long conversation. I mean, we could talk about this all day, and I know you're passionate.
I absolutely love this part of my job. Animal collectors are I have a big interest in the collectors, and I absolutely love this part of my job. So I'm glad to talk about it. Finally, let's talk about it. It's such a topic that people don't want to talk about. They just want to have penalties. They don't want to talk about why it's happening or how it's happening. They just basically sometimes want to lynch people. They don't want to see the whole situation, and it is a really big, broad, multiple area situation.
And we deal with these situations numerous times in a year, and you know, as the communications manager here at the Alberta SPCA, I can tell you we don't put out press releases on these situations very often because they are so complicated and there's so much going on, and they don't fit into
so emotionally charged. These are the most emotionally charged files I have dealt with as an officer, and so a lot of people would just rather bury it and go straight to charges and hope that the problem is fixed.
And they don't fit into the nice little box like that.
They
never do.
That is so true. There is no perfect little box for an animal collector.
Karen, thank you for coming in today and sharing your passion on this topic with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And if you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to have a listen to an episode from last spring titled The Legalities of Cat Traps, where we talk about what property owners are allowed to do when it comes to setting traps on their land to catch neighborhood free-roaming cats, and then the legal pitfalls as well they face if they don't follow the guidelines on setting up those cat traps properly and making sure that the cats are cared for while they're in their care. You can find that episode from May 2021 on our website, albertaspca.org/news/podcasts. Thank you for listening, and we'll chat again soon.